Hello everyone, welcome to my channel Techify with Adil. So today we will be discussing about Azure files. So this is one of the Azure Storage Services, and this video is a continuation for the previous video we posted on Azure Storage Services. Azure File Storage offers fully managed file shares in the cloud that are accessible via industry standard server message block SMB or NFS protocols. So this you can compare very similar to our file server, Azure Files. So Azure Files file shares can be mounted concurrently by cloud or on-premises deployments. SMB Azure file shares are accessible from Windows, Linux, and Mac OS clients. NFS Azure files share are accessible from Linux or Mac OS clients. Additionally, SMB Azure file shares can be cached on Windows Server with Azure File Sync for fast access near where the data is being used. So here we can see it's very similar to our file server, and also you can get a similar of experience as if we are accessing to the file server by using the Azure File Sync. So it will be syncing, it will create a cache to the Windows Server so that you will be able to fast access the data. Azure Files key benefit. So first is shared access. So Azure File Share support the industry standard SMB and MFS protocols. You can have meaning you can have a seamless replace your on-premises file share with Azure files without worrying about application compatibility. Next is fully managed. So Azure file shares can be created without the need for managed hardware or an OS, because it's a service provided by Azure, and the backend is going to be like server OS and updates, patching, and all these things is going to be managed by Azure. Scripting and tooling. So PowerShell, commandlets, and Azure CLI can be used to create, mount, and manage Azure file shares as part of the administration of Azure applications. You can create and manage Azure file shares using Azure Portal and Azure Storage Explorer. Resiliency. Azure file shares has been built from ground up to always be available. So replacing on-premises file shares with Azure files means you don't have to wake up in the middle of the night to deal with low power outages or network issues. So generally, any hardware related issues or backend related issues is not. We no need to do any support on that part. Fully will be managed by Azure. So familiar programmability. So applications running in Azure can access data in the share via system IO APIs. Developers can therefore use their existing code and skills to migrate existing applications. In addition to system IO API, you can use Azure Storage Client libraries or the Azure Storage REST API. So this is all about the Azure file storage. So next service we'll be seeing is about Azure Queues. So Azure Queue Storage is a service for storing large number of messages. So once stored, you can access the message from anywhere in the world, like same as the other Azure services. So a queue can contain as many messages as storage account has room for, like potentially millions. So each individual message can be up to 64 KB in size. So queues are commonly used to create backlog of work to process asynchronously. Queue storage can be combined with compute functions like Azure Functions to take an action when a message is received. For example, you want to perform an action after a customer uploads a form to your website. You could have a submit button on the website trigger a message to the queue storage. Then you could use the Azure functions to trigger an action once the message is received. So this part we have already discussed in our previous video about Azure functions. You can refer back to that video to learn more about Azure functions. So you can combine this Azure function with the Azure queue. So all messages will be stored to our Azure queue. Then based on the messages, once you have a particular message, you can use that to trigger the Azure function to do an action, like send you a notification, or move the file, or update the file, or up the server, or some kind of actions can be connected using this Azure queue and Azure functions together. Next we'll see is Azure Disk. So Azure Disk Storage or Azure Managed Disk are block level storage volumes managed by Azure for use with Azure VMs. So conceptually they are same as the physical disk, and they are virtualized, offering greater resiliency and availability than a physical disk. With a managed disk, all you have to do is provision the disk, and Azure will take care of the rest. Then Azure Tables. So Azure Table Storage stores large amount of structured data. So Azure Tables are NoSQL data storage that accepts authenticated calls from inside and outside from the Azure cloud. This enables you to use Azure Tables to build your hybrid and multi-cloud solution that have your data always available. So Azure Tables are ideal for storing structured non-relational data. So these are the Azure Storage Services, and each has their own specific use. So based on your requirement, you can select the Azure Storage Service and can use it over. Okay, here we're seeing a small comparison chart between the storage services we discussed just before. So Azure Blob Storage. So this is object storage for unstructured data. So use cases is like for backup, for disaster recovery, big data analytics, and media storage. Then file storage, Azure File Storage. This is managed file shares accessible via SMB and NFS protocols. So use cases are like file sharing, lift and shift applications, shared storage for applications. Then Azure Queue Storage. So message queuing for large workloads. So decoupling application components, task scheduling, asynchronous processing. Then Azure Table Storage. So this is like NoSQL key value store for semi-structured data. And use cases are storing structured non-relational data, web applications, and user data. Then the last one is Azure Disk Storage. So persistent high performance block storage for Azure VMs. So use cases is like virtual machine storage, databases, and enterprise applications.